Entrepreneurship and family are Ian Starcher's passions. As a dedicated husband and father, Ian found that building businesses allowed him more time to help his family and other people. There's a lot of other stuff about Ian in here that you can read up on. He's been a friend, a partner. We've spent a lot of times together down at Starbucks having good discussions on all kinds of things. So he's one of my good buddies, and I'm so glad that you're speaking today.
I'm glad you left this up here so it can remind me what I'm supposed to talk about. So, some of you know that one of my companies does the brochures and website and stuff like that for Marketplace Connections. So I get to find out a little bit ahead of time who the speaker is going to be from John. So I was very excited about the December end of the year speaker. But that person canceled, so I'm here instead. I want to, we're going to be talking about listening, which is paradoxical. But I think it's a really, really important subject. And one of the things that I feel is important to note about it is, and I'll put in a kind of a historical context. Does anybody here know what Greek fire is? You're familiar with that term, Greek fire? Okay, Greek fire, back in the ancient times, was this horrible, amazing weapon they would use. They would shoot it on a ship. It would burn the ship. It would still burn on the water. And the thing that's weird about it is we have no idea what it was. We lost that. Another, again, kind of a similar time period, and a little bit later, we used to have things called war horses. And now we have cavalry where people would ride in and fight, but war horses actually would fight. They would bite and kick the enemy as well as the soldier on the horse doing whatever he's doing. And we don't know how to train horses to do that anymore. We don't know. We lost that. My biggest concern in life of late is in the 21st century, I'm afraid we're going to lose how to listen. If you look at a younger generation, I just recently got off a project where I was working with a lot of people in their 20s, and they would stop and check their texts and answer them in the middle of a conversation, not just in the middle of a meeting, in the middle of a conversation. And I'm like, what's this about? And I thought, well, that's that generation. But I've just recently been working with another company, and I'm meeting with a guy. I'm charging him a whole lot of money per hour. Per minute it's pretty expensive. And we're talking, and he's working on his computer while we're chatting. And I'm thinking, you're 60 years old. You should know this process. Besides, you're paying to listen to me. I would listen really closely. So, that's. So I think it's more than just a generational issue. I think it's becoming a kind of an epidemic of sorts. So, although he did correct his ways, to brag a little bit, I did a Kickstarter for him. So in a 30-day period, we raised this company over $1 million. So he's, at least for a day, he's happy with me. We'll see. We'll see how happy he is when he gets my bill today. But so that it certainly is a fun thing. Just for those of you who don't know my background, I develop businesses. That's kind of what my career has been over the years. Wasn't intentionally meant to do that, but building and selling the businesses just kind of worked out that way. And now I come alongside businesses, usually with a fee plus equity situation, and help them, stabilize or build or expand their profitability. So that's kind of what I do for a living. And as a big part of that, of course, I got to find out what's going on. So I really, got to listen. But with regards to listening, I'm sure all of you or most of you have heard of Dale Carnegie. And Dale Carnegie, in one of his chapters, talks about how to be a genius. And he relays these stories, as he does in his book. He's a storyteller in his teaching style in his books, about sitting at this banquet with this woman, and she was talking, and all he was doing is listening. And at the end of the banquet, she went up to the host and said, Dale Carnegie is the smartest man I've ever met. And he says, I said maybe 25 words the whole evening. And so, it was one of the tips, if you really want to look smart, listen to people. Abraham Lincoln said, it's better to remain silent and thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. So, there is some other side benefits to that sort of thing. But when we're looking at chatting with people, there's different forms of doing that. John, obviously, that's what he does professionally, and then he learns about people and then applies, lessons from his life. to their circumstances. But some people are not comfortable with how to break the ice. How do you meet somebody and have a conversation? It's for some people it's awkward, they can get into deep conversations, or they can get on a topic like sports, but just how do you relate to people? So the thing I learned years ago, I didn't come up with it, I learned it, called F.O.R.M, F-O-R-M, and it stands for family, occupation, recreation, and message, if you have a message that you want to share. When you start a conversation with them, you can ask a question. So tell me about your family. And the trick is you don't go, well, tell me about your family. Oh, okay, what do you do for a living? Oh, okay, what do you do for fun? That's kind of weird. You're interviewing them. But you take that conversation to the next step. So, okay, so you have a 16-year-old. Are they going through their licensing? And that's one of the things that how to tell people you're listening to them is that your response is in concert with what they just said. It's not, random. One of our children's autistic, and he's developed amazingly so, but over the years he will miss certain cues, and he'll go over here and talk about termites when you're talking about something else entirely, because he's into the termites at that period, or volcanoes, or whatever it is at that phase. So that's a critical thing. And really, if you can grab a technique like that, you can start developing relationships, and it's in the context of a relationship where you can learn the skill of listening. There's a sales trainer named Tom Hopkins, and one of the things he teaches in a conversation, most people make the mistake that whoever's the speaker is talking is controlling the conversation. That's really not true. Whoever's asking the questions is controlling the conversation, because they're controlling the direction it goes. So again, it's listening that's the key for empowerment, because when we're listening and then subsequently talking, most of the time, what are we trying to do when we say something to somebody? We're trying to change their behavior. We want them to do something or believe something which will lead to doing something. We want to express an opinion or a fact that will change their behavior, right? I mean, if you stop and think about it, that's a lot of what communication is. Of course, there's sharing our feelings and that sort of thing, but a lot of times even that's, I feel this way, so stop doing that, or I feel this way, and continue doing that. Again, we're trying to modify somebody's behavior or maintain somebody's behavior. So again, that also gets back to that form where you've got the message. If you want to deliver something to somebody that you've just met. So again, sometimes little techniques really go a long way to developing these listening skills. So the other one of them, which I'm sure most of you have heard, is a term called active listening, which is where you paraphrase back what somebody said. So, for example, throw out something that I could paraphrase back to you, Tim.
I had a wonderful Thanksgiving with my family, and we had 15 people attend our Thanksgiving dinner.
Wow, we have 15 people. That must have been great, it sounds like.
Yeah, great.
So that's a simple example of active listening. And what that tells Tim was I was paying attention. I got it right. And if I didn't get it right, like I said, wow, 30 people. No, that was 15. Or if I misunderstood something that was a kind of more significant issue, then he'll go, no, you don't understand right. And so you can, again, you're listening better because you're getting the point that they're trying to make.
How are the termites?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They're great right after the volcano.
Yeah, there's a little digression on that. My wife Sherry gets mad at me when I do these sort of things, but I can't resist. So my son, we were driving in the car, and she said to this particular our sons, she says, "You need to take a bath when we get home." And he has this weird responses to things. Sometimes, and so I don't want to take a bath. And this is why he didn't want to take baths, because he won't know when to get out. That was his explanation. I won't know when to get out. And so I said, well, I'll throw a piranha in, and then then you'll know it's time to get out. And my wife looks at me like, you're going to send him off or whatever. But I didn't, because he goes, well, what kind of piranha? And then he goes to explaining to me the different kinds of piranhas. Well, this one wouldn't, because this is saltwater, it wouldn't work. And he went all through all, I didn't know he knew about piranhas. So even a list, I had no idea there were that many piranhas. So Sherry got the last laugh a little bit on that. But we had a dialogue, so that kind of worked out. But the other thing you can do with listening is, like I mentioned before, is modify people's behavior. A lot of us are in management situations where we have people that we have to manage their behaviors. And one of the things that is a good technique for that is it does have an aspect of listening, but it also has a more significant aspect of respecting somebody. And that's how do you put a correction in? That's one of the hardest things to do when you're managing somebody is, you can't just say, you're screwing up, you're a screw up, fix it. That doesn't really work in our culture. Maybe maybe in contracting or something, construction, maybe, I don't know. But in most places that I know, it wouldn't fly very well. It wouldn't be constructive. They wouldn't know what to fix, and they wouldn't know how to fix it. So there's this thing called, I first learned about it by reading of all books, a book by Mary Kay Cosmetics, and she calls it the sandwich approach, which is where you compliment somebody, you put in the correction, and then you compliment them again. And that's the sandwich, 2 pieces of bread and the meat of the message. And it's a way of, if you compliment somebody in the first point, they're going to be more apt to listen, and then they can hear the correction. Obviously you want to do it in an appropriate way of correcting somebody for their behavior. So, and then where the listening component comes into that is letting them feed back to you. Help them, if necessary, do the active listening to make sure they understood. And if they have issues with that, if you've created that intimacy and relationship, especially by the complimenting them, they will tell you what the problem is. It may be, I don't really know how to do this. I never was trained. And that would be embarrassing if your job is to do X and you don't know how to do X. That's threatening. You're afraid your boss will find out and fire you. But now it's safe. So you can have a dialogue on those sorts of things. So again, that's just a little technique that kind of work. It works with kids too. Teenagers, it stops working for a while, but it's been my experience. But I've never figured out what works on teenagers with any consistency. Instead of just me talking on listening, because that is paradoxical, for a half an hour, is I wanted to get some specific or general things that you guys run into in communication, and we could talk about those, so we could have a dialogue on those sort of things. So think back on any situation you've had where you've had a discussion or conversation with somebody and you feel, well, gosh, I could have gotten better. And then we can talk about that as a group. So somebody be bold enough to be first, or I'll pick somebody.
I'll add one, just because our culture in America is becoming more diverse with many more internationals coming. We as Americans often want to communicate, but we communicate in our culture. We don't think that other people are raised totally different.
Yeah.
And we use words, we use different thoughts that don't mean anything to them.
Yeah, there's George Bush got into trouble with that a lot. Not W, but the first President Bush, because he would use analogy slang like, that was a great slide into home. Well, he lost the international, but I have no idea what he was talking about. I was in a situation where this company did not provide the service that they needed, and I wanted my money back. And it was a relatively substantial amount of money. And they were saying, well, you use the term affiliate, so what we said would work if you use it as affiliate. The software doesn't work the way we need it to work. And so I said, well, I use the word affiliate because you guys use the word affiliate. So I didn't know the context of the word affiliate the way you guys were. And I'm trying to explain this to her, that she can't pin me on that one. And I said, well, let me back this up for a second. I said, what if I told you to put it in the boot? What would you do? And she's, was done, but she had no idea what I was talking about. And I said, well, in England, your trunk is called a boot. So that's, if we were talking, I use the word affiliate or I use the word boot, it's a different meaning. I said, what if I told you to go across the zebra? What would you do then? And I said, well, a crosswalk in England is a zebra. So, again, it's... Huh? Yeah, okay, there you go. There's zebras everywhere. And so, that, again, they're trying to get to the point where, just like you were saying, Jim, different words mean, different things, and certainly talking in local slang, so to speak, it doesn't necessarily work. At one of the companies that I work with, we did a Kickstarter for, they get all their manufacturing out of China, and so we got to be, again, kind of conscientious about start getting into conversations that make no sense, and on both sides, but they seem to be much more conscientious about making sure we understand than sometimes we are. So, but I know, thanks for sharing that, Jim. That's a really good point. So, it doesn't. Go ahead.
Well, I had a question. In my work as well, I have to do a lot of listening, both in mediation as well as in coaching. But I find myself challenged very often because I have a particular, as you say, reason for the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The difficulty I sometimes have is not preparing for my next question. In other words, instead of listening, I'm preparing for my next question. So how do you kind of...
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I've been there myself, and then you miss what they just said, and you're like, oh, well, where am I going? What I found works for me, and nothing I know I do 100% of the time, or I'm perfect at. Maybe some of you guys are, but I'm not. But one of the things I found to be successful in that is I listen. I shut my brain off. There's a song I heard recently. Is that I couldn't hear the words coming out of my mouth because my thoughts were so loud. And I thought, well, that's a clever line. But what I found was if I listen with intent, and then I active listen, I feed back to them what they said.
Right.
That does two things. One, it of course lets them know that I'm listening, and make sure that I got what they just said, which correctly, as well as make sure. But it also gives me enough time to do that tip off to the next conversation. Kind of like what I was talking about with the F.O.R.M. You ask a question, and then you ask a question related to what you were just discussing. There's another technique that can help in conversations, and it could apply to this as well, is, oh, by the way, it's, if you ever drove a stick shift, and you got to temporarily for a moment go into neutral to go into the next gear, right? This is like linguistically going into neutral for a moment, because you can move the conversation in an entirely new direction. So if you end up getting stuck on listening about piranhas, you can say, oh, by the way, we need to do this other thing when we get home too, or whatever. And it's a way of getting your conversation either back on track, or at least the direction you feel is the track. So I don't know if that helped or not, but so, Tim?
Something in our business that we come across all the time is the question behind the question.
Uh-huh.
Right? So somebody might say, well, Tim, I'm worried about my investment return. Okay, well, you might be worried about your investment return, but really the observation is I'm worried about making sure my money's going to last the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the things, too, with active listening is not just listening to the question or listening to what they're talking about, but there's also something else behind that.
Yeah.
That you have to be conscientious about.
Yeah, in those situations, questions that are whys and hows are very effective versus questions that end up with a yes or no answer. So,
Open-ended questions.
Open-ended questions, exactly. So, so in that example, I would say, well, why do you feel that way? Or how do you think that's going to impact you? Then that could uncover the question behind the question. But yeah, in fact, that's a common, obviously in your line of business, but in lots of conversations, when somebody expresses a concern, they're really not necessarily expressing the concern, So that's where the active listening also can come in to help, but open-ended questions. Gary, you?
Let me throw out a scenario online
Sure.
that's in process.
All right.
I'm mentoring
Hot off the press.
Yeah, I'm mentoring a young professional that has a product that requires a machine to be made to mass produce it.
Mm-hmm.
And so she worked with a mechanical engineer to develop this thing, had a contract thoroughly written up with her attorney, and he has not come through in contract. She spent $16,000 on this thing, and he has not been communicating like was in the contract he's supposed to, and the product is not working. So she's trying to get some of her money back out of it, can't take a small claims court, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, it's a little big for small
And so
claims,
is there
yeah.
a way to use questions with this person to help them see that they should be returning some of this money, that they didn't earn all the money,
Mm-hmm.
rather than taking it to court and everything else?
Yeah,
That makes
there's,
sense?
yeah, well, first, I've never had that happen in 30 years in business, never. So, one of the things that I've discovered that can work is if you can make people not bad. That is a key thing. People are, most people know when they're not doing the right thing, right? I mean, the truth of the matter is, it's kind of a universal morality. If you're lying, I don't know many cultures that accept lying as a standard. I mean, we do, but we also know it's not something we should do. So the first thing is to say, hey, we have a misunderstanding. I might not understand something right. Can you help me out? So suddenly you're not attacking him. You can say, maybe I'm confused on something. Maybe, I don't, can we chat about this so you can help me understand? Then it flips the whole thing. So now they're like, because they'll have, they may have some defensive arguments again because they know, but now you're in a dialogue. See, that's the key. You've gotten into the dialogue. Once you've gotten into the dialogue, then you can listen and then hopefully impact behavior and come to some sort of agreement. So, I don't know if that helps or not, but yeah. So.
My frustration.
Well,
Go ahead, John.
My frustration tends to be that occasionally I'm around people that when they start talking, there are no periods and it's just a stream of words that never has an end point. And I had one guy who went on for 40 minutes. And so I guess I'm nodding my head. When is it appropriate to interrupt and insert?
3 minutes, about
3 minutes?
37 minutes before.
37 minutes before 40 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
How do you do it?
Well, one of the things I do, and I have the benefit of one of the companies I'm working with right now loves Skype. It's like, why can't we just pick up our phone and call each other? What's wrong with that? It's like one of my sons. He will text 20 minutes of texting for what would have been a 2-minute phone call. It drives me insane. But these people love to use Skype, and Skype is not a perfect medium. It's voice over IP, and it's sometimes you can't really understand what people are saying. So one of the things that I've almost coincidentally learned about that is if somebody's going on and you're not getting them and say, oh, hold on a second, I didn't quite understand what you said, or I didn't quite hear you, or I'll say, oops, I'm sorry, I got distracted by something. Could you repeat that again? Mm-hmm. And then they will hopefully repeat it, and then you immediately kick into active listening.
Okay.
And then you can active listen, which will slow them down, mm-hmm. make sure that you got it,
Yeah.
and then if they're going off on some piranha tangent, you can do the oh by the way. And then re-gear the conversation direction you want. Does that help?
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I find the same thing. I have people I work for, they get going and they dive so deep into it, and I go, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not getting it. Go back.
Uh-huh.
What was this and what was that, and help me understand this, and then I'm back in control of the conversation instead of them being in control.
And it takes a little bit of bravery. Yeah.
What's that?
Do the hand motions
The hands.
work?
This is the Middle East thing. I grew up in the Middle East, so
Yeah.
this is the hand.
That's right.
It works very well. I had a question. The thing that we run into the most in this generation, most people that work for me, is this device
Mm-hmm.
or the computer. One of the two things, which is so the idea that multitasking is okay is. Like, I'm not going to fight that. So, like, for me to go say, well, put your phone down, we've tried that before. That doesn't always work. So I'm assuming that they're going to have the device,
Mm-hmm.
and that it will, it tells me whether or not they're listening to me often
Yeah.
or something. But how do you manage that without offending the person with the kind of the abrupt, old school, like, you're annoying me because you're
Sure.
paying attention?
Yeah, like I said, I worked with a lot of 20-year-olds recently over the summer, and it's like beyond rampant there. One of the things is you got to be bold enough to ask for what you want. Say, look, I want to, I don't want you to miss something and then have come and bite you in the back later. So I really want to make sure we talk about that. The other thing I've done that works, and it's a little uncomfortable, but it is very effective. I stop talking. And I just sit there, and then I eventually notice. And then I pick up the conversation again, or I'll say, hey, we've got a limited time together, so let's focus and get this conversation over with, and make sure we got the data transfer we need, and we move on. Data transfer if they're in their 20s makes a lot of sense, but whatever slang you need to use. So that's the other thing that I found, and they get it. You do that a couple of times with the people that age, that they go, oh, maybe this isn't the thing to do. So that's a couple of techniques I've used. Again, nothing works 100% of the time, but that last one is fun too if you're old enough to do it. It's
I'm going to do it this week. So. I'm looking forward to it.
So, we've got just a couple more minutes. Is there any other scenarios that you can think of that might be something that we could dialogue on?
How about using analogies to get difficult points across? I mean, is that obviously not necessarily a listening tool, but
it's
a communication tool?
Well, I mean, the greatest teacher in the world, in my opinion, was Jesus Christ. And he used stories and parables all the time. And, what was interesting about how he talked, it was often a two-level thing. So a lot of people didn't get really what his point was, but a few people got the point, or he was really nailing them. I mean, it's like they really got the point in a sharp way. But analogies or stories or parables can be very effective ways of communicating. Again, as long as there's a cultural connect with that. That's the only thing that and it's not just cultural in terms of country, but generations or where you came from. Socioeconomic makes a big difference. When I have family from Ohio, and I remember as a boy, my uncle saying, "Go put it by the Davenport." I had no idea what the Davenport was. It's a couch, but I didn't know that. Yeah, it's the name of a manufacturer of a couch. They call it a Davenport. So I don't know. So you got to kind of keep that in mind too. But yeah, that's things. And if you look at a lot of the great teachers like Dale Carnegie, like the 1 Minute Manager and all those kind of stuff, Augmendino, they use stories. So that's a good thing. When I sold insurance, that was one of the things that we would do a lot. We would tell a story of somebody who had purchased our product and their motivation, so the person could reflect on that motivation. Go, oh yeah, that made a lot of sense. So that was something that helped.
My wife often says to me, Jay, you listen to me, but you don't hear me.
Mm-hmm. Well, step up, man.
What does she mean by that?
You're the only one that struggles with it. Nobody else has that problem.
I don't think any other husband has that problem. I think you're unique in that, dude. Well, I think, for starters, in my experience, and I may be way off on this, there is, in fact, with my wife, I'll say, do you want me to listen like a woman or listen like a man? And we have a term for that. That means something, because oftentimes women tend to, in my experience, like to just have somebody listen to them and talk. Men like to provide a solution. They're not listening for this. They don't want a solution. They want to be heard. So when you throw out your solving the problem, because you're a problem-solving man, that's not listening. That's a different thing. So and that was literally the technique that she and I developed. So she would say, I just want I'm driving now. Okay, great. I'll listen. Or no, I got a problem. I got to figure out how to solve this. Then as we call it, listen like a man. So that might be something that you guys could apply and see if that works.
Here's a really short story, but it fits. I thought that I'd come up with a solution to what we're talking about several years ago. Pat and I were in Leavenworth on vacation. We were coming back home. We'd had a great time. We're in the car, and she's commenting on everything that she's looking at. Look at that beautiful tree. Oh, look at the sky. Look at the river. Look at this and look at that. And I'm going, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. And this went on for about 10 or 12 minutes. And finally she said, I feel like you're not listening to me. And I said, yes, I am. Well, you don't say anything. And I said, well, I don't have anything to say. I'm just enjoying listening to you. And really what I'm doing is hibernation listening. And I said, you know what my computer does when it powers down? it hibernates to conserve power. So I'm conserving power. I'm powering down on listening to you. And if there's something I really want to comment on, I'll power back up. And so I'm meeting your needs and I'm meeting my needs. And I said, can't you see me doing seminars on this all around the world? And she said, no, I don't like that kind of listening. Forget hibernation listening. And that was the end of it.
That was it. It was a one-time thing.
Yeah, I think powering up with your spouse is usually the best technique.
Yes, I think my wife would rather have me hear her so I can obey her. Rather than anything else.
It gets back to
That's
that
what she
modifying
means.
behavior.
That's what she means.
Well, what you're, what you were talking about, again, active listening would have saved the day for you on that. You said, boy, that is beautiful. You may not even turn your head, but at least you said that, you were listening by paraphrasing back what.
Something more than uh-huh.
Yeah. Is pretty weak. Well, we've only got about another minute. So what I'd like to wrap up with is, if one of the things is the Sweens were talking about presents, Christmas presents, and that's everybody. My father gave my mother a chainsaw once when I was a little boy. Yeah, and she was really not amused because she had no need or interest in a chainsaw. But if you really want to give an amazing gift this year to your loved ones, give them the gift of listening to them. Because people are starved just to be listened to. And and you think, well, like strangers who don't have family, maybe they don't have enough people to talk to or something like that, but frankly, our own kids, our spouses, really just want to be listened to just as much as anybody else wants to. So that would be what I'd like to leave you guys with, is the gift of listening. So, thanks.